Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can see and hear me all right. My name is Matt Smith. I serve as Senior Vice President at Sudan Relief Fund, and I want to thank all of you for joining me this afternoon for what should be, I hope, an informative, and enlightening conversation here. This will be effectively a quarter 3 update for you all. This is something that Sudan Relief Fund hopes to continue to do every quarter, with the main goal of just being able to share with you all, our donors, exactly what's happening on the ground there in Sudan and South Sudan, and also just to provide an opportunity for you to be able to ask some questions and get a visual and a sense of what's going on there firsthand. So, I think some folks will probably continue to trickle in here, and I'll try to admit them here and do double duty here as I talk. I'll be admitting people into the meeting as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. How this will work is we'll have about 30 minutes here of discussion for where I'll be sharing photos and stories and project updates. And in about the last 5 to 10 minutes or so, I'll take on some of the helpful questions that you all sent in when you registered. So I'll be able to take about 3 or 4 of those questions that I've written down here. I'll answer those. And if I don't get to your question, of course, feel free to follow up with me afterwards. I would certainly be happy to speak, to speak with you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And I always like to start here, at least with a map of South Sudan and Sudan. So you'll see here these green dots. If you've been a part of these webinars before, you'll recognize this map, but I think it's useful for us as just a way to orient ourselves as to where we're talking about. So these green dots each represent a project area where Sudan Relief Fund is currently involved in a project. This is not an exhaustive list. There are actually additional project locations as of this year that we'll be adding to this map, and hopefully we'll be able to share that in the next webinar. But for now, this gives you a sense of the locations and the geographical areas where we are involved. And to start this webinar, to provide you some critical updates on what Sudan Relief Fund is doing on the ground, I want to take you first to this area here in Sudan in the Nuba Mountains. So we'll start with this green dot here that says Gadel. This is an extremely remote area in Sudan, and if you've been following our work, you'll know that that is where Dr. Tom Katina and the Mother of Mercy Hospital is located. So I want to start here this is a lot of text and a lot of maps here, but this map here on the right is where I want to direct your attention to. If you can see it hopefully well, this is actually zoomed in the area where Dr. Tom's hospital is. So some of these dots represent various fights that are going on currently as the war continues to rages in Sudan. Some of them show, humanitarian constraints where it's very difficult to get aid into. So this map shows just how complex that little green dot is that I showed on the previous map. As some of you probably know, Sudan is in the midst of a brutal civil war right now. It's been going on since 2023. There's been massive displacement. There has been ongoing fighting that has spread all throughout Sudan. Western Sudan in Darfur has been heavily affected. Khartoum, the capital, has been largely destroyed. And this is a battle that continues to rage on pretty much unabated. And there's not really, from my side of things, any evidence that either side wants to get together to really broker any meaningful peace at this point. So with that context, all of this fighting and displacement that's been happening in Sudan has pushed millions of people south towards Dr. Tom's hospital. So this is a region that used to be about 1 million people in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. Now it's upwards of 3 million people. So you can imagine when you're adding this many people into the mix of what's already a very challenging humanitarian environment, the needs are just overwhelming. This is a visual of what that area of Sudan looks like in the Nuba Mountains. So it's quite arid, quite deserty. There is little to no infrastructure. The roads for large portions of the year are completely inaccessible because they get rained out, because it's essentially just a dirt path. The conditions are extremely harsh, and the humanitarian access as it stands right now is extremely limited. So for the last couple of years, the majority of the need that Dr. Tom and Mother of Mercy Hospital was seeing was displaced people. You had a million and a half people essentially showing up to Dr. Tom's doorstep at the hospital there looking for any sort of care, any sort of humanitarian aid. Recently, in addition, we've also begun to get reports of fighting that has been coming closer and closer to Nuba specifically. So you're seeing the battle lines specifically shift in that part of Sudan. And whereas previously Nuba was somewhat of a safe place from the rest of the war in Sudan, you're now seeing those battle lines shift and fighting come closer and closer to the hospital. So the hospital itself is under a lot of pressure because you have all of these people who have arrived looking for help. You've got the added complexities of nearby fighting now as well, and it's created a very challenging environment for Tom in the hospital. So what is Sudan Relief Fund doing to try to help this? Well, a few of the main projects that we continue to remain involved in are centered around food, clean water, and medicines, the basics. So some of y'all may recognize this, but this is what's called a ready-to-use therapeutic food, and it's a packaged food that's also known as plumpy nut. This is specifically to help bring malnourished children back from the brink of death. So in this particular part of Sudan, there is a high rate of acute malnutrition for specifically young children. And this product can save lives, and it doesn't take much. It's usually a week of treatment where, children will receive the plumpy nut for, they eat it maybe once a day for a week, and they can really be rescued from the brink, it's a remarkable product. And this next slide will hopefully give you just a visual of that. So this was a photo that we got from one of the partners on the ground there in the Nuba Mountains of a child before and after eating this plumpy nut. So this was Ikram, a little baby girl on the left, and she arrived to the medical facility experiencing acute malnutrition, experiencing malaria and pneumonia. And the mother was inconsolable. According to the report that I received, she was certain that her child would die. But just after basic treatment and consuming this plumpy nut over the course of just a week or two, you can see the after photo of Ikram on the right there with her mother, who's now smiling, and she looks quite healthy. So even in the midst of these horrific humanitarian conditions, saving lives is pretty simple. It's just getting food into the hands of the people who need it the most. And you can see here, this is exactly, so this is basically what it looks like. This is a refugee camp or an IDP camp for displaced people, boxes of plumpy nut here on the ground, and they just are handed out once a day to the people who need them, specifically for children. Now, Sudan Relief Fund has had shipments of this plumpy nut in partnership with a couple of other organizations who we work with in Nuba. They've been going up over the last calendar year, and we're going to be resuming the purchase and delivery of this plumpy nut starting again here in the next month or two. For a period of time, Nuba is completely inaccessible due to the roads being washed out. So we loaded them up on the front end to make it through the rainy season. And now once the rainy season has concluded, we'll resume these shipments up, getting this into the hands of the children who need it most. With the volume of people who are in need here in Nuba, the additional concern that we're seeing right now is a spread of cholera. So this is a preventable disease that is primarily due to ingesting dirty water and is spread from person to person and from drinking dirty water. And I think what breaks my heart is that this is something that's totally preventable. Cholera is not something that anybody should have to suffer from if they had access to reliably clean water. But unfortunately, for those here in this particular part of Sudan, that's just not the case. You layer on top of that the volume of people in these individual refugee camps, we're seeing cholera spread extremely quickly. The only way that you can stop this is by getting people clean water. Of course, you can get them, there is a vaccine for cholera, and there are some treatments that you can put people on. And of course, you know, as best we've been able to, we've been sending up specific medicines for that. But long term, the solution is just to get people reliable, clean water. And so in this area in Sudan, SRF has been involved in the construction of 30 different water points in this particular part of Sudan. So this was actually a photo that I just recently received, probably a month ago or so, of the actual rig here that is drilling a new water well in Nuba. And Sudan Relief Fund is involved in the construction of 15 new water wells and repairing 15 broken or existing water wells that were not functional. And, you know, each of those water points represents a community that is going to be transformed, not just with the gift of clean water for them, but also for their children and generations to come. So it eliminates the risk and spread of cholera, and it provides sustainable clean water source for people in a very remote part of Sudan for many years to come, hopefully. And so I'm very excited about this project in Nuba. And the gift of water, as I always say, water is life, and the gift of water is something that everybody deserves. So even in this remote part of Sudan, we have found a way to get these rigs in partnership with some other organizations that we work with. We've got these rigs up there. They're drilling wells, they're repairing wells, and I've received some great feedback from the ground there as to the results that we're seeing. So we talked about food in Nuba, we talked about clean water. The final thing is we continue to be a primary provider of medicine to Dr. Tom Katina's hospital at which is the Mother of Mercy Hospital. So this is actually a aerial shot here of the actual grounds of the hospital. You can see how remote it is. Dr. Tom, the American missionary doctor from upstate New York, who has now been serving in Sudan for almost 20 years now. I think it's 17 years to be exact. And, you know, this, as things stand right now, this is one of the most challenging times that he's ever seen in Sudan and in Nuba. You know, his hospital has seen everything. I mean, he's been bombed, he's been targeted, but he said to us, like, this is an extremely challenging time because of all of the layered challenges and complexities that I've talked about, including widespread displacement, ongoing war, and so forth. So Tom continues to soldier on, continues to be my personal hero. And I'm actually traveling to South Sudan and Sudan in just a few weeks. And I will be meeting Tom and actually bringing him back to the U.S. with me for just a short visit. But it will be just really great to get to spend hopefully a little bit of time with him and get to hear some of the stories and what he's experiencing over the last year or two. This is Tom with his wife Nasima on the left and their two adopted sons. I think I maybe mentioned on my last webinar, but they recently adopted the little baby on the left there, Vincent Moses. And then we've got his other adopted son, Francis, on the right. So just a lovely family, and I'm looking forward to seeing Tom soon here. This is a photo of Dr. Lewis, who is on the left, and he is actually a Sudan Relief Fund donor and longtime partner, and travels often with Sudan Relief Fund to Nuba to help volunteer at Tom's hospital with him. You can see Tom there treating a patient. So Sudan Relief Fund continues to be the primary provider of medicine at the hospital. And we have a number of, I think, exciting new initiatives. Despite all of the chaos that's happening in Sudan right now, we are still looking to forge ahead with new initiatives and new projects in partnership with Tom and the hospital. And I look forward to hopefully sharing some more of that with you in our Q4 webinar when I'm able to share a bit more detail about those projects. So from here, I want to take us into South Sudan. So all that time we spent talking about Goodell and the Nuba Mountains and this part of Sudan. And for the remainder of our time together here, I would just want to take us into South Sudan, and I will hop around to a few of the recent project updates that I think you all would be hopefully interested in hearing about. I'd like to start by grounding this next part of our conversation in some statistics. And so these are the most recent statistics on South Sudan from the UN. And I want to direct your attention specifically to these high level numbers here, which, as you can see, are extremely concerning and represent needs of the highest order. I mean, we are seeing almost the entire population of South Sudan is categorized as being in need. You've got, 2 million displaced people within South Sudan. We've seen cholera spread from Sudan into South Sudan as well. And so that's an active concern too. And you're seeing destabilization and violence ongoing in South Sudan due to their own political turmoil that's been developing over the last year as well. So the situation in South Sudan itself is extremely complex. And I think between Sudan and our work in Nuba and South Sudan, our work across the country there, I think each of those locations represent two of the greatest humanitarian needs on earth. I think in Sudan, you've got very unique circumstances where there's lots of victims of war and displaced people in extremely remote and challenging conditions. And in South Sudan, you've got a lot of the same. Each has some slight differentiations in terms of the political dynamics, but by and large, there's very few places on Earth that represent places that are more in need than the places we're discussing today. One new project location that I don't think I've ever spoken with on these webinars is an area in the northeastern part of South Sudan called Fangak. And Fangak is an area that has experienced tremendous turmoil over the last 8 months. It was caught up in some tribal conflict and fighting earlier this year, which actually led to a hospital being bombed. A Doctors Without Borders hospital was bombed in Fangak. This was, I think, maybe back in March. And it's also experienced tremendous flooding. So you've got a population here in Fangak that is already pretty remote. Then you've got this conflict, this tribal conflict that's ongoing, and you've also got severe flooding. And so some missionaries that we partner with got in touch with us recently and said, there's a huge need to reach these families who are stranded essentially due to some of this severe flooding. Can you assist us with the purchase of basic food items, rice, lentils, really basic food items? And we said, of course. And I just got these photos on WhatsApp just not too long ago of the Franciscans actually loading up this barge with some of the food items that they were able to purchase in partnership with Sudan Relief Fund. And these will actually be going to these families in Fangak and saving lives. This is going to help about 1,000 families and sustain them over a period of time to help stay alive. So I think that's something that Sudan Relief Fund does extremely well, and it's something that's only made possible because of donors such as y'all who are partnering with us. It's responding very quickly and efficiently to urgent humanitarian needs. Because we've been involved in this part of the world for quite a while now, over 25 years, we have deep relationships with people on the ground there. And so when there are needs that come up very quickly, like we're talking about here in Fangak, Sudan Relief Fund is able to very quickly mobilize and ensure that these needs are being met very quickly. And so, thank you all for continuing to play a significant part of that. Similar situation is happening on the other side of South Sudan, in Western South Sudan. In Western Equatoria, we're seeing significant tribal conflict. We're seeing ongoing displacement of civilians, and we're hearing reports on the ground there from our partners that really the basics are at a premium for the populations out there: food, water, shelter, medicine. This is actually one of the diocese, we're very remote dioceses out in western South Sudan. I love this aerial shot that we got. This was last year, I think, of Ave Maria Parish, where two very humble priests are serving. And they recently got in touch with us. You can actually see one of them here. This is Father Avellino here who's pointing. And this is Sudan Relief Fund's Executive Vice President David DeTony next to him. And Father Avellino here, he got in touch with us and said, look, I've got hordes of people coming to my doorstep because they've been displaced due to fighting here in Tambora, which is the, nearest, I guess, town, for lack of a better word. It's not much more than a village, but they call it a town there. So he said, look, there's been extreme fighting in Tambora. I've got all these people showing up to Ave Maria. Can you help us? And this is actually one of the camps that's somewhat nearby. And it just shows, this is a population in western South Sudan that's been significantly impacted by this cycle of displacement. So, I've been out to this part of South Sudan a handful of times. I've gone out there maybe 3 or 4 times now. And it seems every time that I've been out there, I hear a similar story. I meet a family and they share with me, oh, well, we are from Tambora, but violence, as it pops up, then we have to flee. Then when things quiet down, we try to go back home. But then not too much longer, violence outbreaks again and we have to flee. And it's this constant cycle of displacement that is just so common in South Sudan, that's so disruptive to establishing any sort of a normal life. And so that's where people like Father Avellino and some of the other missionary partners who are on the ground there step in and try to, as people are experiencing this cycle of displacement, they try to step in and say, hey, well, here's the basics. Let's get you back up on your feet. Let's make sure that you have food, water, medicine for you and your children. And let's make sure you have a safe place to stay. And, that's what Sudan Relief Fund is privileged to be able to partner with Avellino and Albert, the two missionaries out there. We're privileged to call them our partners. They've been out there for a long time, and they're two of the greatest men that I know. And they have gotten in touch with us recently again about providing some just basics, food, water, medicine. And we've been able to step in with the construction of a handful of hand pump water wells over the last year, as well as some just basic food items. And we're also continuing to support a health clinic out there, as well as even some educational facilities that they've been starting that have been pretty successful so far. So a lot of still great things in the midst of tragedy happening. I also want to direct you here to some cool water projects that Sudan Relief Fund has been involved in. This has been something that we've been really taking on much more of the last year. I think the last tally I saw, I think that Sudan Relief Fund will construct or repair some combination around 50 water wells this year. So we're really excited about that. And we've got water wells that are spread out all across the country in South Sudan and even in up to Nuba as well. So this was one in Wow, South Sudan. We've got this water tower that's gone in. And this is actually what the water points look like here. So it's submersible, solar powered, water sits up in the tanks. And then when kids or the community want to come use it, they actually just have to turn a spigot. It's not like your traditional hand pump that you might otherwise see. More wells going in Remenze. This was actually, I just got this photo no more than 3 days ago of a drill that that's out in Remenze. We've got another water well going in there. And you can see here they hit water. They got to go pretty deep, typically about 70 meters or 200 feet. And then also too, I just got this photo quite literally yesterday. This is hot off the press here, but these are 3 new Land Cruisers that we recently purchased and had shipped to South Sudan that will be going out to some of the missionaries that we work with in some of the most remote parts of South Sudan. So really excited about these. And, a vehicle for a lot of people can make all the difference. It means being able to effectively get out to a leper colony that's 50 minutes away. It means being able to take even just basic medicines to a refugee camp that might be an hour away. So we try to equip our partners on the ground there who are laboring day in and day out to serve the population there with the tools that they need to be able to actually serve people. And so we had these three new Land Cruisers show up yesterday, and those will be going out to some of the missionaries to be able to effectively do their ministry. So very excited that those arrived as well. And lastly, I want to take you out to Nzara here, which is in the left corner. At St. Teresa Hospital, I've got some exciting updates on that front. So we've got the Safe Motherhood Project here. That's something that Sudan Relief Fund has been involved in for a number of years. South Sudan has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. And so it's the most dangerous place for a woman to have a child. And so at St. Teresa Hospital, there's a program that is specifically addressing this incredible need. And Sudan Relief Fund is very privileged to be able to actually to work and partner on this project. But I'm most excited to share with you some photos from the recent opening of a new pediatric ward. It's the Graham Pediatric Ward, funded by a Sudan Relief Fund donor. And this recently opened as of July of this year. And it is a wonderful new pediatric ward at St. Teresa Hospital. This was just an idea about 16 months ago. And 16 months later, it is fully functional and operational in one of the most remote places on the planet. And so we're very proud of our team there that's on the ground. We're so thankful for the donor who helped fund this particular project. But it is going to radically change lives in this western corner of South Sudan. And this hospital, St. Teresa Hospital, is slowly, I think, turning into the best medical facility in all of South Sudan. That's my opinion. It's certainly not a fact, but I think it's well on its way to becoming the best medical facility in all of South Sudan. This is outside of the opening of the new pediatric ward. You can see the bishop there of Tumbra, the Diocese of Tumbra-Yambio, Bishop Eduardo Kusala, standing outside of the new pediatric ward. And then this was actually David Detoni who actually went for the opening of the pediatric ward and spoke at the opening. And it was just a grand celebration. I will be seeing it in a couple of weeks myself for the first time when I'm there in Nzara in the middle of October. And this is inside the ward. So the pediatric ward was just an idea 16 months ago. Now it's fully functional and operational, staffed completely, and we're so thrilled about the lives that this is going to save. Next, we are looking ahead to a new NICU facility, so a neonatal intensive care unit at the hospital, which would be, again, it's just another step in that direction of becoming the premier hospital for the entirety of Western South Sudan, potentially all of South Sudan. And so that's next on our project list here, specifically for St. Teresa Hospital. Just quite literally a stone's throw from the hospital is the St. Bakita Orphanage. You can walk there from the hospital that we were just seeing to the orphanage. And the St. Bakita Orphanage is run by the Blue Sisters, Sister Bianca B. It's a local order of nuns. And this was an orphanage where just about 16 to 20 months ago, they needed a new place. They were outgrowing their current environment. And so they came to Sudan Relief Fund and said, hey, we need new accommodations. We need them to be in a better place. We need it to be larger to accommodate the growing number of children that we're receiving at this orphanage. And so Sudan Relief Fund is pleased to report that we've got all the buildings there on the grounds of the orphanage complete. We have a girls' dormitory, we have a boys' dormitory, and we've got, bathrooms and a water well there as well. So it's a remarkable facility. We've got a staff dorm as well. So this is a photo of all the children. You can see some of the nuns kind of scattered there. You actually see Dave there in the center as well. He was out there visiting pretty recently. This was an orphanage that now has, I think, over 200 children. So it's just a remarkable impact that's happening here at the orphanage. This is inside it. So it's just a great facility. And again, it's in a part of South Sudan where, if it were not for the love of these sisters and this orphanage, you would see hundreds of children left with, I'm not sure what, to be honest. I mean, I don't know exactly what their future would look like if it were not for this orphanage, but it's in return given them a chance at life and at a chance of success in life and a hope as well. So we're very privileged and proud, and will continue to be supporting this particular orphanage. The other orphanage that we are still currently involved in is the Pan Nagath Orphanage in Rumbek, South Sudan, which is run by the Missionaries of Charity, the order founded by Mother Teresa. This is another place that I have a huge heart for, and I'm just so privileged and proud that we get to partner with these incredibly hardworking and humble women that are serving this population in Rumbek, South Sudan, and caring for babies that would otherwise be completely abandoned and left with no one to help them. So that is an orphanage that we've just recently completed. I believe we had a renovation done of their roof. We have also recently constructed a new multi-purpose hall there, and we've got a number of exciting additional initiatives planned over the coming 10 to 12 months as well. So with all that said, I just ran through, that was about 30 minutes or so. I think I almost got just under the 30-minute mark as I had promised, but I did just want to also allocate at least a couple of minutes here for some questions. So I got a couple of questions. One was from someone here. They said, can you give us a snapshot of the current political climate in South Sudan? Well, I don't think that could be a whole nother webinar itself, I think. So I don't necessarily have the whole, I don't want to, bore everybody with the details of exactly what's going on in South Sudan, but the current political situation is very tenuous. And I would say that since Sudan and South Sudan broke off into two countries, this is the most on edge that South Sudan has been. The current president actually imprisoned the vice president of South Sudan, and he is currently on trial for treason, the vice president, that is. So as you can imagine, that has set the country on edge right now. So there is everybody is kind of just waiting and watching to see how this continues to develop. But the current political situation, if it wasn't already challenging enough working in South Sudan, you have this added layer where you've got the president of South Sudan who is imprisoned and is now putting on trial the current vice president. It's extremely challenging, as you can imagine, to try to navigate the political dynamics. But what I'll just say is this, like Sudan Relief Fund, no matter what comes, no matter whether who's president, no matter what's happening, no matter, who's fighting who or who's in charge, we're there to serve the people and the populations who are most vulnerable and are most in need. And that's what we'll continue to do regardless of what's happening. Another great question here was this, they asked, when you personally travel over to South Sudan, what are you actually doing on the ground? Which is a great question because I'm not a doctor. And so I'm not certainly, administering medicine when I'm over there. But I have a couple of main goals when I travel to Sudan and South Sudan. One is just to bear witness to the people's stories who are there. Sudan and South Sudan doesn't get a lot of coverage in the news. It's not something that we see often covered. It's even challenging for me sometimes to get good information about what's going on there. And so I consider it part of my responsibility and duty while I'm there to just bear witness to the stories of people suffering and to be able to bring that back and share it with people here so that there's a better understanding of the plight of those who are in need in this area of the world that otherwise doesn't get a lot of attention. And then in my capacity as, senior vice president of Sudan Relief Fund, my responsibilities are twofold while I'm on the ground there. The first is to make sure that the projects that you all are generously supporting are actually moving forward, are happening, that we have keeping a close eye on these projects and making sure that they are currently, in motion. And then also, too, identifying new areas and new projects for us to dive into in the coming year. So it's to make sure those current projects are ongoing, but then also, of course, making sure that we're identifying new project areas and areas that are in need as well. The last question here that I got, which is another great question, one was, how can a donor be most effective in supporting these efforts given all of these challenges that are on the ground? Really, the way to be most effective is to find organizations that you trust and support them generously, whether it is Sudan Relief Fund or others. The difference that you can make in this part of the world is remarkable. And it doesn't take much to change someone's life completely. I mean, I showed you that photo at the beginning of the webinar of that child who had been impacted with the receiving of the plumpy nut, right? So you saw the before photo. Just after a week of plumpy nut, which is extremely cheap, that baby is alive and well and is going to have a life ahead of them. And so I would just encourage people to understand that they can be extremely impactful and effective by closely working with charities that they know and trust, whether that is Sudan Relief Fund or others, and make an extremely significant impact and save lives. And it's a challenge, but I would encourage everyone that's involved or interested in this work not to let the overwhelming nature of the conflict that is ongoing there get in the way of knowing that they can change an individual's life today. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that it can be overwhelming, it can seem overwhelming, it can seem complex. It is complex. But the reality is that the basics can change people's lives, and that by, continuing to take an interest and partner with groups like SRF, you all are making an incredible impact. So with that said, I want to just conclude today. Be on the lookout for another webinar link in Q4, probably in November. I think I've mentioned a few times on this call, but I'm going to be traveling to South Sudan and Sudan in just about a week. October 5th, I will be on my way over there. And I'll be getting back at the end of October, and then I'm planning to do another webinar in November. And I will look forward to sharing some direct updates from my travels and experiences there, and sharing some photos as well. So I hope that you all can join then. In the meantime, if you have questions or anything comes up, of course, feel free to reach out to me directly. My line's always open. But I want to thank you for spending some time today caring about South Sudan and Sudan. It means a world of difference to us and those that you're serving. And God bless every one of you. Take care.